Cities are a symbol of wealth, power, and prosperity. This is true today, and it was also true in the past. In this video, we will explore some of the most important cities from ancient civilizations around the world. We will start in Europe and then move on to cities in the East, Asia, and America. Athens is considered one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. It reached its peak during the classical Greek period. The foundations of democracy were laid in Athens, and it was one of the richest cultural centers in the Mediterranean from the 5th to the 2nd centuries BC, thanks to the presence of some of the most important philosophers and intellectuals in history. The history of Athens is intertwined with its mythology, although its first inhabitants were Ionians, and there is evidence that it was already occupied since the 11th century BC. Its most notable period was during the mandate of Pericles in the 5th century BC, when some of the most important temples of the Acropolis of Athens were built, such as the Temple of Athena Nike, the Erechtheion, and the Parthenon, that suffered great damage throughout the city's turbulent history. Other wars, such as the Peloponnesian War against Sparta, weakened the power of Athens until it recovered part of its splendor in the Hellenistic period. Rome, considered the capital of the world in ancient times, was home to one of the most powerful empires in history, the Roman Empire. Many advances were made in Rome in areas as diverse as architecture, medicine, philosophy, literature, and art. Founded by Romulus and Remus in 753 BC, Rome began its unstoppable expansion during the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC with its control of much of the Mediterranean, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Persian Gulf. Rome was one of the most prosperous cities in antiquity, and those who visited it could spend the morning in the Forum, shop at the Trajan's markets, attend the Circus Maximus, or take a bath in the thermal baths. Today, the ruins of these ancient monuments are still preserved as the country's greatest treasure, the remains of that era, and the reason why Rome is known as the Eternal City. The first capital of the Chinese Empire is currently known for housing the largest collection of terracotta warriors in the world. Its history dates back to the 2nd century BC, when Emperor Qin Shi Huang unified the regional kingdoms to form a single territory, promoted a single language and currency, and built numerous roads for the transportation of goods, people, and armies. The Chinese Empire came to compete with Rome and Constantinople for world hegemony. The famous terracotta warriors belong to this period, though they were not discovered until the 20th century. Today, this spectacular find can be visited about 30 kilometers from Xi'an, and it is one of the most touristic places in China. Other important monuments from other periods can also be found in the city: the Great Wild Goose Pagoda, the City Wall, the Nestorian Stele, and the Great Mosque, one of the largest in China. Petra is the most precious treasure of Jordan. It was formerly the capital of the Nabatean Kingdom, who settled there in the 6th century BC. Its peak was under King Aretas III, who expanded the empire into Syria, Saudi Arabia, and conquered Damascus. Petra's prosperity was based on the water supply and security it provided to merchants who crossed it with their vehicles full of spices, silk, and exotic products. What is most striking about Petra is its impressive architecture, currently its main tourist attraction. Its different monuments were excavated directly on the stone, thus maintaining its characteristic reddish appearance. Some of its facades in Greek or Hellenistic style were built after the conquest of the Roman Empire, which, despite occupying and controlling the territory, gave the Nabateans a certain autonomy. Currently, this city is one of the most visited in Jordan, thanks to its original architecture, as well as the cliffs and ravines of more than 80 meters high that guard some of its most precious historical jewels. Considered a holy city by Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the capital of Israel has always been linked to conflicts and conquests that extend to the present day. The first of these was carried out by King David of Israel and Judah, who created his kingdom in the Old City in the 11th century BC. He was succeeded by his son Solomon, who began to build some of the buildings that are still preserved from that time. Jerusalem is one of the oldest cities in the world, and throughout its history, it has been under the control of numerous empires such as the Babylonian, Persian, Macedonian, Roman, Byzantine, and Ottoman. The different conquests left behind some monuments from different periods and religions, although many of them were destroyed by the successor rulers, as happened with the Western Wall, which is nothing more than the remains of the Temple of Jerusalem. Located in the center of the Anatolian Peninsula, Hattusa was the ancient capital of the Hittite Empire, one of the most influential peoples of the ancient Near East. Today, the village of Bogazkal in the province of Sorum is located on its former site. Its peak was reached during the 14th and 13th centuries BC, when it managed to defeat the neighboring peoples of Anatolia and when its territory expanded. The ancient double wall of the city, both fortified with towers and defensible internal divisions, has been preserved from the Hittites. The Lion's Gate, which is the one in the best condition, and the King's Gate, of which only a few ruins remain that were discovered by Charles Texier in the 19th century. Although the majority recalls Machu Picchu as one of the most important places of the ancient Inca Empire, it never became the capital, as that was always Cusco, the city that became the most important in the Andes and South America. Its peak occurred during the reign of Pachacutec, who made the Andean city a powerful political and religious center. The arrival of the Spanish was a decisive factor in the decline of the Inca Empire. In 1534, Pizarro conquered Cusco with the support of other local groups, and the city began its colonial era that are today one of its main tourist attractions. On the banks of the Nile, where the ancient temples of Luxor and Karnak stand today, the city of Thebes once stood, the capital of the Middle and New Kingdoms of Egypt. It was at the hands of Pharaoh Mentuhotep Tsiku, who waged a war to reunite Egypt and who decided to move his capital, which until 2040 BC was located in Memphis. The city, which was once one of the most prosperous in the country, has some of the most important buildings of the empire. The funerary temple of Queen Hatshepsut, the temples of Luxor and Karnak, linked by a large avenue of sphinxes, the Colossi of Memnon, the Valley of the Kings, and the Valley of the Queens. The decline of Thebes occurred in the 7th century BC, when the city was sacked by the Assyrian kings. 3 centuries later, it would be conquered by Alexander the Great, who founded Alexandria to the north of the country and moved the capital of Egypt there. The capital of the Achaemenid Persian Empire was built by Darius the Great in 512 BC to differentiate itself from the rest of the dynasties of the empire, which until then had their capital in Pasargada. Despite the fact that Persepolis was located in a poorly protected area and did not have many defenses, the city was under permanent construction for more than 2 centuries. The destruction of Persepolis occurred just after the fall of its empire, after having been defeated by the army of Alexander the Great during the reign of Darius III. As revenge for the destruction caused by the Persians in Athens, Alexander sacked Persepolis, and in May of 330 BC, he burned the city. Many of the monuments were reduced to ashes. Others were reformed years later. Currently, this complex, located near the city of Shiraz, is one of the essential visits in Iran. On the shores of the Mediterranean, in northern Tunisia, lie the remains of what was once one of the most important and ancient cities of the Phoenicians. Its earliest history dates back, according to legend, to the 9th century BC, when the city was founded by Queen Elisa, better known as Dido. According to Greco-Roman writings, the young woman came from Tyre, a city located on the coast of Lebanon, from which she had to flee after her brother murdered her husband, uncle of both, whom she married to access the throne after the death of her father. When the Phoenicians landed in the Tunisian Bay, they had to deal with the indigenous population who, far from declaring war on them, ended up living with them. Carthage was not a mere Phoenician settlement. but rather a mix of both peoples reigned there. This led to the city becoming one of the most prosperous and wealthy republics in the Mediterranean, which aroused the suspicion of Rome. Its decline and destruction came with the Punic Wars, when the Carthaginians were defeated in 146 BC by the Romans. Years later, the Emperor Caesar Augustus formed the capital of the Roman Empire in Africa on it. Istanbul has a past full of conquests. What was originally an ancient Roman city, with the arrival of Constantine the Great, Byzantium changed its name to Constantinople and began a period of growth, both geographically and economically and culturally. Between the 2nd and 1st centuries BC, the development of the new Constantinople led it to become the largest and most populous city in the world. Like Italy, it was built on 7 hills, and its structure followed the model of Rome. Some of the constructions of the time were the Hippodrome, of which 2 of its obelisks are still preserved, the Church of Santa Irene, or the University. The fragmentation of the Roman Empire caused the arrival of the Byzantine. In the 6th century, with Justinian, is when Hagia Sophia and the city wall were built, and it is at this time that it became one of the richest cities in Europe. We hope this journey through the bustling streets and towering monuments of these ancient cities has sparked your curiosity about the wonders of the past. If you enjoyed this glimpse into history, be sure to leave a comment below and let us know which city fascinated you the most. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Ancient Stories channel for more captivating explorations of the world's forgotten civilizations.